A little over 2013 was when I first started to use social media. All my friends had Instagram and YouTube, and despite what was first curiosity, turned into moments of comparison with the curated and perfect lives of influencers. Fast forward to 2026, I now have a better relationship with social media and understand that what influencers present online does not always match their reality. Sharing my personal life turns us to today's video. Hello everyone, my name is Clyde Issip and I'll be focusing on week 18, the commodification of self, and week 20, the psychological impact of social media use. The course concepts that I'll be focused on in this video is social comparison theory, effective labor, self-commodification, and self-optimization. Through this video, I plan on exploring two questions. First, what are the negative mental health effects associated with upward social comparison as it relates to influencers whose content is focused on makeup or beauty? And the second question focuses on how the algorithms reward social media influencers who produce trending or popular content, even if this kind of content is one that the influencer does not want to make. In addition, what are the hidden costs of effective labor, and how might this affect the mental health of social media influencers whose content is focused on beauty? And lastly, what might be the mental health effects of commodifying your vulnerability and authenticity for your audience to consume? And in the latter end of this video, I'll be focusing on the steps that you as the viewer can take to either mitigate or reduce the effects associated with upward social comparison. We first turn into how algorithm works. Instagram itself contains the following features. We have your feed, stories, and the explore page. The feed is where users can share and connect with people or things that they care about, meaning that whatever is at the top of a user's feed is what the algorithm predicts to be most relevant to the user's interest. According to Ashiri, the Instagram algorithm is a system powered by machine learning evaluating user activity, interaction history, recency, and content quality. In other words, each user's feed is personalized, meaning that what I might see on my feed is different from what you as the viewer might see on yours. In addition, the feed also contains content from the people we follow. Stories, on the other hand, are photos or videos shared by a user on their page, which disappear after 24 hours. Next, we have the structure of feeds and stories. Instagram uses signals to determine which content from whom users see. The most important signals, according to the Instagram algorithm, are the information about the post, the person who posted, your activity, and your history of interacting with someone. While these might be the most important signals, there also remains many more signals in which the algorithm utilizes to determine which content it deems the user will most likely interact with. Now that we're done talking a little bit about the Instagram algorithm, let's also turn to the algorithm for YouTube because it is a little bit different. For the YouTube algorithm, it analyzes the audience and tries to think of itself as the viewer to figure out what videos the viewer wants to see next. There is also a viewer profile created for each user based off of two factors. The first factor focuses on the videos that the viewer has clicked on in the past, and the second factor focuses on how long that viewer had stayed to watch that video. What is also important to note is that bigger channels that have millions of subscribers are more likely to be recommended to the user as the platform has already tested that their content has worked with a large audience and has found the content to be popular with a certain demographic. Now we know a little bit about the Instagram and YouTube algorithm. How does this tie into influencers who have a large young female following? Let's take a look at Zoe Sugg. She is also known by her channel name Zoella. She was a top influencer during the 2013 era, known for her fashion and beauty content. Through her haul videos, makeup tutorials, and videos about her personal life, she was able to amass 3 million followers by November of 2013. I want to turn to Jaroslav, who in 2016 wrote that social media afforded celebrification is classified by continuous multiple uploads of the private self, access, immediacy, and instantaneity. In 2013, not only did she post consistently about her lifestyle, but her second channel also allowed viewers access into the details of her personal life. For instance, if we look at her main channel titled Zoella, she would often post videos with some of them being titled her winter nighttime routine, everyday makeup routine, pamper evening essentials, and etc. And then when we look to her second channel, which allowed audiences a glimpse into her personal life called More Zoella, they were able to learn more about what she did day to day. She had vlogs where she would go out with her friends. Let's turn now to Seaman. Despite many thinking that being an influencer is not a full-time job, Seaman puts in the same amount of work as if she was working one. For instance, Seaman would manage emails, brand deals, partnerships by herself, while evaluating the opportunities she was given based on their long-term value. A lot of her photos were also planned, staged, and edited before posting, with one photo even needing location scouting. Brand events are attended, not for financial compensation, but just so that she can receive that exposure. However, authenticity is also another important factor when maintaining audience trust. To ensure that she remains authentic to her audience, she also limits the amount of sponsored content on her Instagram page. Ultimately, if we look at her income, it is dependent on if she makes these sponsored posts, if she has these paid brand partnerships. However, too much of it, she might lose that audience trust. I want to shift our focus to Veer's 2024 study, which examined how YouTube influencers balance authenticity, commodification, and agency to understand how influencers operate within the constraints of YouTube. So, in total, there were 5 key findings in the study. The first one found that authenticity and agency are tightly connected. Not only do influencers need to appear authentic to maintain the viewer's trust, but their agency is highly dependent on how well their authenticity can be maintained. Second, their identity is sold to brands and is used to appeal to audiences. Their lifestyle, personalities, and opinions are marketed to be sold for audience consumption and sold to brands. Their agency is constrained by commodification. For instance, for influencers to make money, brand partnerships, sponsored content needs to also comply with the YouTube algorithm, which is necessary for influencers to earn their income. When I think about this, I kind of think about how in order for an influencer to fit in with the YouTube's algorithm, they might have to not have freedom into what they want to say, as doing so might result in them losing these brand partnerships. Fourthly, we think of content. Their content is largely shaped by the YouTube algorithm, audience expectation, and brand sponsorships. While influencers can gain more followers and receive more money, this also means that they need to follow trends to stay relevant and remain appealing for companies. Lastly, and I've touched upon this already, is that there is this balancing act between authenticity and monetization. For influencers to thrive in the YouTube platform, there needs to be a balance between being relatable and genuine. When we think of the implications, I wanted to talk about relational labor. While the viewer can look at Zoella or even Seaman and admire their success as influencers, what might be ignored is the relational labor put into maintaining their brand. Relational labor is the hidden emotional and social effort spent in building or maintaining trust and relationships. The process involves social media creators who use the platform to form intimate connections with the audience to generate engagement. These include actions such as being on 24/7, responding to comments, or posting daily on their social media. Relational labor does help to increase that closeness that audience feel when they're watching their favorite influencer. This also means that influencers are required to perform for their audience. Now let's turn to social comparison theory. Thought of by Festinger all the way back in 1954, there are a few components of social comparison theory. We've got upward comparison, which is comparing oneself to someone who might be attractive, excelling better academically, etc. It basically means comparing myself to someone who I see is better in my abilities in some way. If an individual compared themselves to someone who has better abilities, the desire might be for self-improvement purposes, where we make a comparison to motivate ourselves to better our abilities. Now that we've got the basics of social comparison theory, let's turn to the implications of repeatedly engaging in upward comparison in a photo-based social media site such as Instagram. One of the reasons as to why I wanted to focus on Instagram is because of my own experience with upward comparison and to explore the possible mental health effects it might have, especially for young adolescent girls who use Instagram. When we look at a user's page, they have posts and they have their highlights. While there is a chance that a user's feed or what they have on their page can also be about the more flattering moments of their life, there is a very high chance that most of what they're posting are really the best moments of their lives. One of the studies that I had actually used when looking at upward social comparison was a study from last year by Bonfatti et al. Researchers had done a meta-analysis which looked at the previous literature of 83 research articles, and in total, there was a total of 55,000 participants. There were three key findings in the study, and this dealt with mostly upward social comparison. It was found to be that participants who engage in upward social comparison online tended to have higher body dissatisfaction. Upward social comparison was also found to be moderately linked to eating disorder symptoms, and lastly, upward social comparison was found to be associated with lower body image, meaning that individuals did not see their body as worthy enough. The analysis found that upward comparison was one that was associated with negative outcomes, including the symptoms mentioned before. In addition, it was found that these effects were consistent across many studies. In other words, the results from the 83 studies, despite their differing sample sizes and study designs, it was found that upward social comparison had negative effects on a person's self-esteem and body image. It can be argued that upward comparison might be used to motivate oneself. The repeated engagement of upward comparison might lead to not feeling enough or feelings of envy, especially for digital natives who have poor digital literacy skills. Social comparison theory explains that individuals evaluate their abilities by comparing it to others. However, on social media, influencers whose content is focused on beauty present an image of idealized, filtered, and curated beauty, which might intensify upward comparison because what the user sees online might not be the influencer's true appearance. When we look at FOMO culture, it might thrive because Instagram and YouTube are structured around highlight reels, continuous updates, and comparison loops. When viewers watch a highlight reel or a YouTube video showcasing a book deal that broke the first week of sales or launching a beauty brand sold in major drugstores, these were Zoella's best moments. A viewer might watch this content and feel as if they might be behind in life, when in reality they are not. There is also the issue of comparison loops in consuming content, where the viewer sees you seeing the success of others. For instance, it was found that passive browsing and upward comparison increased loneliness and dissatisfaction. And loneliness and dissatisfaction were the main factors that drive the fear of missing out culture. In addition, social media algorithms also prioritize content on engagement, whether it be likes, comments, and shares, watch time, interaction, and how the content aligns with a popular aesthetic, whether it be through a trending sound or format. In other words, influencers who comply with the platform's algorithm whilst producing content that users engage with and align with trending content are rewarded with visibility. Even if said content is not one that the user really wants to produce, influencers might also latch on to this trending beauty and or makeup content because it performs well on their channel or Instagram page. There might be pressure felt in conforming to trends. Over time, this also might create a feedback loop where the influencer is focused on trending content because it gives them visibility to a larger audience. This is part of a micro-celebrity culture where self-presentation is strategically managed for audience engagement. The effective labor of influencers whose content is focused on beauty and might result in stress from needing to maintain their physical appearance and producing trending content to remain relevant. They might also have the effect of having reduced authenticity, as they always need to present a positive persona which might not align with their true self. Lastly, when influencers commodify their vulnerability, a loss of their true self, authenticity becoming performative, and a dependency on validation through likes or comments might occur. The mental health outcomes might be just as damaging as there might be difficulty in separating in the private versus public self. More importantly, it is important for us to understand, whether as the audience or viewer, that what we see on Instagram or YouTube does not always match how they might be living in real life. It matters that we lessen the extent of the engagement with upward social comparison, as this might have psychological mental health effects. And lastly, we turn to internet skills and why they matter. An awareness of how algorithms influence what people see. Despite Gen Z being digital natives, growing up with social media does not always equate to having digital literacy skills. For instance, Mitchell found that more than a third of high school students were not aware that Facebook curated the content they see. Since what we consume online might have an effect on our self-esteem and how we might see our own bodies, it's important for us to implement steps to ensure that the content we consume on Instagram is one that we want to see. The first step is being aware that the algorithm affects the content seen on social network sites. However, the next step is to take action as the user to ensure that we do not fall down a rabbit hole of mindlessly consuming content and or comparing our real life with those of curated, idealized life of others. We can take simple steps such as not scrolling on social media sites as soon as we wake up or setting time each day to be focused on our own hobbies. Thank you for watching my video. References will be found in the end.